Alright guys, I'm going to start off today with this worksheet. It is pretty simple, but sometimes people get confused with the instructions. What it's wanting you to do is to take each letter, so in this case we have E, and it wants us to add the four terms around it. So in this case we're going to add 5x, negative 2, 6, and negative 7x. Now to do that, you've done this kind of thing in 1A already, but just in case you've forgotten, you're going to make sure you put x's with x's and numbers with numbers. You don't want to mix those terms. So if I'm going to line it up, I'm going to essentially make two columns. I'm going to add. I'm essentially going to make two columns. I'm going to make one column with x's, so 5x, negative 7x. I'm going to make another column with numbers, negative 2, positive 6. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that when I'm adding, that my x's stay with the x's and the number stays with the number. So 5x plus negative 7x, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down the x because it doesn't change in this particular instance because I'm just adding or subtracting. Let me write that to where it's a little more legible. There we go. Then I'm going to add 5 and negative 7. If you're still bad with negatives, some of you are, you know who you are. If you're still bad with negatives, punch it in your calculator. 5 plus negative 7 gives me negative 2. Then I'm going to add my numbers. Negative 2 plus 6 gives me 4. Now, those are the two terms that you're dealing with. We're always going to put the x value in the x values in front, and what we call just the numbers called the constant, we're going to put that second. So in this one, when we write our answer, we're going to have negative 2x, but we added all those together, so that's plus 4. Now, if that were a negative 4, that would be negative 2x minus 4. All right? So what I'm doing now is I'm looking for negative 2x plus 4 down here at the bottom. So negative 2x plus 4, there's one. I put the letter I was dealing with, which is E. I'm looking for any other negative 2x plus 4. There's another one. I'm going to put another E. So on and so forth, looking for any other negative 2x's plus 4. And that is all of them on this sheet. So in this case, we've got two E's. I recommend not crossing out the whole block because you need those numbers again, but crossing out the E. So take and cross out your E. And now it's been used. The reason I say don't cross out the numbers is because for the next number, next letter, O, you're going to add the 4 touching it. So negative 2, negative 6, 9x, and 6. And you're going to add those together. Again, putting x's with x's, numbers with numbers. So let's take a moment and set that up. What we did last time, we had two columns. We had one with x's, we had one with constants. So we're dealing with negative 2. So we're going to put negative 2 over here in the constants column. I'm using parentheses so I don't lose negatives. That's the only reason I have those. It doesn't serve any other purpose. Negative 6x is going to go in the x's column. So I'm going to have negative 6x. There we are. Go to our next one, 9x. And the last one is 6. Make sure you keep all the groupings together correctly. Make sure I'm dealing with just the 4 terms touching O in this case. And then I add together again. So again, I'm going to drop down the x, so go straight down. I don't try to change it at all when I'm adding and subtracting. So and then I do negative 6 plus 9 is going to give me positive 3. Then I'm going to do negative 2 plus 6 gives me positive 4. Again, when I'm writing those terms, I'm going to use the signs of the term themselves. So positive 3 is going to be positive 3x. Positive 4 is going to be plus 4 here. So now I'm looking for 3x plus 4 at the bottom, so I can put an O there. So I'm looking along, and there's one. And I'm not going to do all of them for you, but just kind of give you an idea of how that works. There's another 3x plus 4 down on the very bottom line. Surely you can find it now that I've told you where it is. And remember, again, crossing out the letter would be a good idea, so you know that you've used that one. Not crossing out the numbers, because you're going to need the numbers later. Alright, pause this video, go on to your, finish this worksheet, and we'll look at the rest of it here in just a minute. Alright, next worksheet. Sorry it's not the best copy on this. I know it's a little grainy. It's the best copy I had at the moment. My scan's not working real great. So, but you have the worksheet in front of you. It says adding and subtracting polynomials up there. Polynomial is an expression that's a number, variable, product of a number, and one or more variables. Essentially, that means anything with one or more terms normally involved, and it has a variable in it. That's essentially what it means. They're wanting you to go with other examples. So they give you 12y negative 5x times y. They give you 2b. They want you to come up with 2 more examples of polynomial terms, and really anything would work. Negative 17 z 45 x, y, z would work. You don't have to have that, but those are examples. Feel free to come up with your own. That's always the best, when you can come up with your own examples. Some things to pay attention to here. Linear. How we know it's linear is based on the number of different terms. So in this case, we say term, we're talking about 7x. Okay, and a constant. We've got both of those there. So 2 terms, it's a binomial. Bi means 2, like bicycle means 2 wheels. So keep that in mind. A quadratic, which we're going to be talking about a lot this particular unit, because the unit's on quadratics. 3 terms, but doesn't necessarily have to be. What's important is that it has an x squared. You can't have a quadratic without a squared variable. Doesn't necessarily have to be x, it could be r or l, but it will normally be x. You will see 99% of the time you will see x squared. If it doesn't have an x squared, it can't be a quadratic. Now this one does have 3 terms, and because it has 3 terms, we call it a trinomial. Tri means 3, as in tricycle. A cubic, again, refers to the fact that there's an x cubed in it. This one only has 1 term. It could have up to 4 terms if it wanted to. Anytime we have 1 term, we call it a monomial. Anytime we have more than 3 terms, we call it a polynomial. Helps if I spell it correctly. We call it a polynomial. And that's if we have 4 or more terms. Now I know we said up here that it's really any number. It's talking about polynomials. Polynomials, I can call a binomial a polynomial, because a polynomial is 1 or more terms. But we don't have a good name for anything above 3. So anytime we have 4 or more, we just call it a polynomial. It's actually all of them are polynomials, but we don't have special names for anything above 3 terms. All right? So what it's wanting us to do now is to combine like terms. And what they've done is you can either do it horizontally, just like we add and subtract normally, and making sure you put x squareds with x squareds, x's with x's, and constants with constants. Or we can do it vertically like we did in the last one. Either one is okay. A lot of people have trouble making sure they don't miss one here, especially if they're not lined up or if they have multiple terms. And what I mean by not lined up in, meaning not lined up in order, that, they'll have multiple x squareds, like they have multiple x squareds here, making sure they combine all of those. Or they'll have an x squared in the middle and it'll be 6x plus 4x squared minus 9x, and there's an extra one. It's not in order, and some people have trouble figuring that out. So lining it up vertically helps sometimes. Subtracting, combining like terms, again lining them up, but instead of adding them, subtracting them. So if I've got 2x there, I'd be subtracting 2x. If I've got 9x, I'm subtracting 9x. If I had negative 9x, that would be important. That would be subtracting negative 9. And you got to make sure you do both of those. And remember, that's why I said I used those parentheses so we didn't lose a negative. What they've done here, and what some people find helpful, and you've got more notes on that on the next page, talking about remembering the distributive property, is what some people do is what they did here. They take the negative and multiply it by that second term, only that second grouping. So I had a negative, essentially a negative 1 times 2x gave me negative 2x. Negative 1 times positive 9 gave me negative 9. And for some people that's easier because now I can combine 7x and negative 2x, get 5x. 4 and negative 9 gives me negative 5. Once I distribute, I'm just adding. For some people that's easier. For some people it's easier to subtract and keep it in columns. I'll tell you though, more people mess up trying to do the columns on subtracting than they do distributing and trying to add. So just keep that in mind. So in this section here, when it's talking about writing in standard form means I have the term with the highest exponent first, followed by the next highest, followed by the next highest, all the way down to where I have the constant last, if there is a constant. If there's no constant, then, I put everything in order that is there. Now, what gets people? So, if I'm writing along and I have 5x cubed plus 3x squared plus 2x minus 15. So that's in standard form because I went 3, 2, 1, and an exponent of 0 there. So that's x to the 0 power. All right. Now, what throws people off is if I take, and we skip one. So I've got 3x squared, let's make that cubed, plus 5x minus 1. Notice I don't have an x squared term here. Well, obviously I skip it. I don't need a placeholder. What your exercise here is doing is it's putting them in a mixed up order and wanting you to fix it. So this first one, I'm looking for the highest exponent, which is that 3 right there. So the sign is going to come with it. It always does. I'm going to move the whole thing. The sign always moves with it first. So I'm going to have negative 5x cubed. And then I'm going to get rid of it so I don't use it again. My next highest exponent would be a 2 if I have one. But if I look, I don't have an x squared. So I go to the next one, x to the first power, which is this one, 4x. It's a positive 4x, so plus 4x. Cross it out so I don't use it again. The only thing I got left is this positive 7, so I'm going to write plus 7. And that's all it's wanting you to do in that section. So pause this real quick, try 2 and 3, come back to it after you've tried that. Rewind it if you need to, if you're not understanding what's going, see if you can get that grasp on it one more time. But all you're doing is putting those in order. Remember, the sign always moves with it. So the next section, hopefully you finished up that last one. Also pretty simple. I want you to classify by the number of terms. So how many terms are there? So in this case, we have one term. That is not a constant and an x squared. When the number is multiplied by the variable, it's called a coefficient, not a constant. So that's one term. One terms, if you remember, are called monomial. No, you may not abbreviate. I need monomial. This one, I got a constant, I have an x squared, I have an x to the first power, 3 different terms, that's a trinomial. Notice I don't give you any that have 4 terms to test your knowledge of polynomial, but they're written right there because I guarantee somebody is going to ask me, how do I spell those? They're right there. Please use your resources. Adding the polynomials. So these are just straight adding, just like we did on the last worksheet and over on the other side. All right. We're adding those. So keep the terms together. If you want to use straight across, you can. If you want to line it up like they've done down here, you can rewrite those. If you were going to rewrite that, it would look something like this. 4x, x, 3, -1. We did the little t there to make sure we kept them divided. You don't have to do that, but you can. So, 4 plus 1 gives you 5x there. There is a 1 in front of that x. Don't forget it. They didn't write it, but it's still there. 3 plus -1 gives you +2. So that's going to be 5x plus 2. All right. Next section. It's the same thing, only subtracting this time. Remember, with subtracting, you can line it up like you did here. A couple of things to pay attention to if you've got it lined up like this. So that's 3x squared minus 2x squared. I do encourage you to say it like that because that'll help you with the next thing when you go 5x minus -3x. Minus negative. You got that double minus sign there is like a positive. All right, just like in English, when you say nobody never did, I mean somebody did somewhere, that double negative. If the English metaphors confuse you, learn to speak English. Just kidding. Minus a negative is like adding. Okay. The other thing you could do with this, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit so it's a little easier to see when I do this, is change all of the signs on the bottom. So that becomes plus, that becomes minus, that becomes plus, that becomes minus, and change all the signs all the way across. And then you're adding. So that'd be 3x squared plus -2x squared. So 3 plus -2 gives me x squared. 5 plus 3x gives me 8x. That's positive, so plus 8x. And then I've got 10 plus -4 gives me +6. All right, either one of those works. Choose which one you like best. The last section says perform the indicated operation. I want to point out 2 things. One, if you notice right here, you have to multiply first. And if you remember your distributive property, you have to multiply to every term. If you don't remember your distributive property, you still have to multiply to every term. So it's going to be 5 times 4x gives you 20x, all right? Plus 5 times 7 gives you 35. Now you have to add that to 6x plus 9. It's just like what we did up there. The tricky one comes in on 19 here, where I add these two and then subtract. Order of operation says I go straight across. So what you're going to do is add these two. Whether you want to do it across and do 4x plus 5x gives me 9x, or if you want to do your column and line it up vertically like we did on the other ones, whichever one works best for you. But I need to add these two first, then find my answer, take my answer, and subtract 3x minus 5. So making up an answer. I said it was 9x there, so we'll use 9x, and phooey. Let's go and use the real answer. So we got 9x minus 4. And then you're going to subtract 3x minus 5. I'll leave you to it on that one. So at this point, some of you may have finished early. That's the end of it. Once you finish both of those worksheets, I do expect to be able to see those tomorrow. So make sure you have them done. But if by chance you finish, I'm not being evil and signing any additional work, but if you didn't finish, you do have to finish that for homework, so be aware of that. But if you do finish that in class by chance, some of you will, if you have any makeup work, and most of you have makeup work, I have my notebook that will tell me if you don't. Most of you have some form of makeup work. I need you to make sure you do it. This is an opportunity. You don't get tons of them. Your end of grading period is a week from today. That means all grades will have to be in and finalized by next Thursday. So that means I stop taking grades. The last day to take grades is a week from today. If you don't get them in, it doesn't matter if you were going to do it or not. It's too late to do it. So you have exactly a week to catch up anything you're going to. I will take anything you do, but be aware, if it's really old, you are not getting a 100 on it. Anything, though, is better than a 0. A 20 is better than a 0. All right? So, happy working.